Hey, welcome to Quick Take. I am Susie Tomanchuk along with James Capps. How are you, James?
I'm really good.
Good,
Thanks.
good. We always laugh about how we have so many ideas that we want to cover and we're like, just press record. So this is an example of us just pressing record. Neither of us are quite ready for exactly which topic that we're going to talk about.
I'm 100% prepared. I did my research. I've read my books. I've talked to
I'm not.
experts.
I'm just going to be brilliant anyway.
That's exactly right. I require all the pre-work to have a coherent thought. Susie just absolutely can go on the fly. And dance also.
All right. Tell us what we're talking about today, James.
Well, we were talking about before while we were in the green room about the challenges of communicating and some of the interesting concepts around. There is a lag in many cases where there's a lag between being heard and being acted upon, or maybe a better way to look at that is the lag between speaking and being heard. So oftentimes we as leaders speak and talk, explain things to our employees. And I think one of the challenging skills is to accept the fact that there is a lag there for some people. And I think that that's a really fascinating element of leadership that we should explore.
And I want to just shift the language a little bit, being heard and then understood. There's clear communication that we need to practice to make sure. And research shows that we believe we're 80% plus in clarity,
right?
But the reality is only 20% lands.
Right.
And so there's that piece to think about, but it's also that people need experience. They need to understand it in context. And so that lag may be their time to understand what that truly means to them. And so that's what, to me, the lag is.
Right.
How can they apply it? Understand it exactly what you're saying in the moment, but they may not really understand the application of it until later.
There's a phrase called the percolation effect, and things percolate through the organization. They're going to be heard in different ways, and they will resonate with people. So yes, your language can be heard, to adopt your framing of that during a town hall or a meeting, but really they'll hear it, but to really understand it will take time as it percolates and finds a home in everybody in the audience's ears.
I like that idea. I thought you were going to go. I like the percolating in terms of the broad communication to more than one individual. And I always think about marinating for me as an individual. And so when I've reflected back on advice, feedback, context that people have given me, especially if it's somebody I trust and that I respect, I will rehear that differently later on.
Sure.
The key to it is my tie-in is that I believe that content or that context of how they experienced me is worthy of me revisiting it later.
Well, I think that's where patience is one of the virtues of leadership. And I think the mistake you can make as a leader is to expect to get the immediate response from your messaging. And I think it's important that you stay true to your message. You try to be consistent. You don't evolve from that. I always felt that that's something that the engineering organization at Comcast, or actually at Comcast in general, was amazing at during the period we were there, that their messaging was tight. And you could hear the head of engineering, you could hear Ralph Roberts, Brian Roberts, any of the shows, and their messaging was always the same, maybe tweaked a little bit, but that consistency allowed it to percolate through the organization, allowed it to be heard when people could hear it and really own it. And I thought that patience is so key when it comes to ensuring understanding as a leader.
I have to reiterate to my experience to what you said. So Comcast used to have a spirit of Comcast where you just started in the organization and senior leadership would go through and they would get time with this small group of individuals. I remember as a young professional being like, wow, they're all kind of saying the same things in different ways as it relates to the area of the business that they run. And I remember through the day how it made me more committed to the organization, how it made me be trusting and make me feel like I want to be a part of this too.
Yeah. I think it's that consistency of idea and difference in voice is the challenge there, and having that approach. And I think that's the phrase I use with my leaders. I want the message to be the same. I want your voice to be yours. So if we can ensure that we're all on the same page, I think the way that everyone comes together will be more consistent. And I think you'll have better buy-in and you'll have better engagement in general.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what that looks like, because I think that senior teams talk about what they want to make sure that they're consistent on, whether it's a new strategy, a new product, if it's kind of a cultural, whatever that is. And they refine the communication of that. And they think about how we're going to email it. And here's the prompts that you need to talk to your team about. But then the next step of that is kind of like you wash your hands. You're like, okay, we did all this, check the box. Everybody should understand. But just like in commerce, you need to hear things 7 times.
Sure.
You need to repeat it more than you think you do. And so how do you check in as a senior team about how is this landing with the groups? What is the evidence that you're seeing that people are adopting this? Are you hearing other people reverberate some of the themes that we've talked about? And you need to check in to make sure that it continues to land.
Well, I think that as leaders, either you need to be really good at or have somebody on your team who is really good at recognizing the reception signals. Those reception signals can manifest themselves in different ways. You want to see what those look like as your messages are being heard. These are subtle indicators that employees are internalizing that message in that direction. And you have to appreciate that they're different between compliance with the message and genuine understanding. And so there is a skill there to appreciate what is being internalized and adopted by your employees when you do that messaging.
Yeah. And there's an observation. I like the way you said that. There's the observation of it. And there's also the questions that are asked immediately and the questions that are asked throughout. Because the first ones are probably understanding or defensiveness or
there's clarification.
Yeah,
right?
the clarification. And then there's the kind of the adoption. Well, what does this mean? How do I do this? Which is good. It's good coaching so for them to do that. And I read something recently that no question doesn't mean that they don't have a question. Sometimes that means they don't understand.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like also be thinking about what type of questions you would expect and see if you're getting those.
It's so important that you have accept the fact that there are cultural and contextual factors in that discussion, depending on the team that you're talking to, depending on the situation, that can totally affect the adoption rate and the absorption rate of these messages. Industry-specific challenges in messaging go a long way. And think about it also during a crisis mode versus a message of stability and positiveness. All of these factors come into play when it comes to trying to determine whether or not your messaging is being heard and adopted. So it isn't a one-size-fits-all by any stretch, but you have to be in tune to those things to ensure that you are aware of how it's being received.
Yeah. And what came to mind as you were saying that is, how do you open it up for questions? What questions do you have for me, given what I've just told you? Really inviting that dialogue so that you can be an observer of what people are asking or how they're reacting.
Right. But the key is that we've all been in the room where the leader has given some sort of presentation and then they uncomfortably force questions on the audience. Oh, come on. I know you have one. Come on. How about you, Jerry? Give me a question. That just doesn't do you any good. You have to have the EQ, the emotional intelligence to understand that this circumstance, whether it's the situation, the time of day, the topic, are all factors in there. If your goal is to walk away as a leader from that meeting feeling good about yourself, yeah, go for it. Force a couple of questions, high five yourself on the way to the gym. You're good. You did your job. If your measure of success is understanding and embodiment of the message, then you have to be more in tune with what is being said and when it's being said to ensure that happens.
Yes. And I guess my point is thinking about that frame. How are you going to frame it up to anticipate questions like, hey, listen, I'm going to go through this and be thinking about what are the questions that you have along the way so that they can spot for that? And then ask a better question at the end that doesn't just, come on, I know you guys have questions about this, but say, what can I clarify about what I just said? Or say, I know that wasn't perfect, so help me fill in the spaces of where you still don't quite understand.
Maybe the takeaway here is that if your way of getting feedback is using the phrase, are there any questions?
Yes.
You're doing a shitty job,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
You've done no work. That is lazy. That is you just saying, all right, I've done my speech. I've pontificated, and now I would like you to high five me on the way out. That's what that means. But if you go in with humility and an openness to being questioned and ask for feedback in a way that is open-ended, other than, are there any questions? You're going to be much more successful in that.
Yeah. It makes me laugh because I think back on my career and that was an expectation. Like if you get no questions, That's good.
They did a
That
great
means you
job.
covered everything, which is so like backwards.
Yeah, it's super funny.
So interesting to really think about what can you tweak in what you're doing to really uncover and help understanding, connection,
Mhm.
engagement.
Yeah, I just think it's like many things, one size doesn't fit all. And you have to be really hyper aware of how you want to get that message out and who your audience is.
Love it.